Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Somebody left me a comment one time and said it was a one of these insult whiny boys, and the person said that I gave more energy and effort when I said greetings, brothers and sisters, like the sisters I emphasized, and how I was anti-man, and so like there was some consciousness involved. I didn't even do greetings, and one of the few people who's now I'm a person who's blocked from heartfulness. I used to listen to this. Someone I knew for years from doing the meditation. He used to listen to my videos, and he said, sometimes you just end a video. Not sometimes. I didn't say anything at the end of the video, so the video would just end, and I wouldn't say it's the end of the video or anything like that. And so I thought up an introduction and a thing at the end because for you guys or whatever, and it made sense and it made the videos better. It was a good suggestion. But anyways, it's otherwise I wouldn't care about doing it. But anyways, that's not what this is about. So I've already made the video. I've covered the Candace Owens stuff. I have a long audio about various divine things, and then I gotta finish up with the Meghan Kelly thing and a little bit on the stuff to do with Calvary Christian and Erika from Law. And so I wanted to say this in the beginning of the video. I forgot to do this. I thought about this last night. And this is about how, the truth is not available to us because the only way you would get the truth is if the people who are perpetual liars and are habitual liars and compulsive liars and, demonic in the way that they do things, admitted to everything. And there's two problems with that. They will never do that. They just won't. They have a criminal mentality, and there's no reason for them to admit to everything. And so they would have to, say this is what we did and this is why we did it. But the bigger problem, even if they were on some level willing to admit to everything, they can't because they don't even know what's lies and what's truth. When people are spinning lies all the time and they are rationalizing their lies and they're, making excuses for themselves about what they're doing, their behaviors, they get lost in their own bullshit and illusions, and they don't know what the truth is anymore. They don't even know why they're doing it anymore. They just get lost in the deception. And so, the only people that know the truth are the people who are so fucking self-deluded that they have no chance of telling you the truth. So you're never going to get to it. You're never going to get it. They're never going to admit to it. It's never going to be proven. How do they bust people like this? Well, they get somebody to rat, right? They get somebody who was willing to testify against the other people. That's the only way that they can make a case and make these things into something legal. And they never get the full truth. And the person that's ratting the other people out is a lying piece of shit. So you can never fully believe in any of these things. So you're never going to get the truth. But a bigger issue with it is you don't want these people, you don't want to be hanging on their every word. When you're desperate for them to give you some resolution and tell you why and to confess and say these things, then they have all the power in the relationship. And you're just beholding to them, and you already know they're lying pieces of shit, but you want details, and it's details that you'll never get. And when you get them, it's going to be dissatisfying. And so for all those reasons, seeking the truth in the cesspit, which I often talk about, is the wrong way to go about it. Like you seek truth by connecting to divinity and the purest essence of creation. And that's where you get the true truth and the real stuff and why it's happening. And there's one more thing to it. Even these evil people are doing, they're doing God's work and God's bidding. People can't even, oftentimes people are, you have thoughts that aren't your own. Like there are divine beings that like put thoughts in your mind just like demons, or you are affected by other people's ideas. Like people will have similar ideas if you live together, just like women will all menstruate at the same time. You share your brain waves and your energy with other people, and it affects you. And so, you get affected by, you get brought down by lower people, and by seeking out the lower and seeking out the lies. All these fucking TV shows and movies that center around murder. Like how many murders have you seen? How many times have you seen the world on the brink of destruction by evildoers. It's all about evil. The villains run the narratives in most TV shows and movies and books. And that's not a good thing, right? The bad guys are really oftentimes the more interesting character, and they're the ones who drive the story. And so that's why we're where we're at today. So there's one more thing. I'm going to get to this weird, creepy story about Bill Clinton, and I've already covered it here. I've already made the clips and edited them. And so I just want to say, and I meant to mention it, it's really just a distraction. It's fake as fuck, and it is what it is. You'll see it when you might have heard of it already. It's a really depraved interaction between Bill Clinton and Trump, where they say Trump performed a sexual act on Clinton. And so it's this, bogus thing that's going around. And my wife and I, we were listening to something. She had this video of these 3 baby skunks that she wanted to show me. We went out this morning did some shopping, did some things together. It's Saturday today. And, she played this. She was in the car and the skunk thing came on. And then we started to drive and it auto-played and it went to these other videos. Some of them were kind of funny, mocking this thing with Bill Clinton. And, we were talking about as we went for a walk, and we both said at the same time, like this is, again, parallel thinking, that this is a distraction. And I said, yeah, it's a distraction because there's nothing in the Epstein files as bad as this. And this is what the Cubies used to do. And so they make up rumors, and they float the rumors around that are so much worse than anything else. And those are the things that get all the attention. And then they debunk those things. And the littler things that don't seem as bad when you start off with, like blowing Clinton, right? Like that's your threshold. And so that's why they do these things. And so it's going around. It's obviously fake, but it's making the rounds. And, it's just going to add as a distraction and minimize the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, which is another reason. This is all it's just a sea of lies. And so it's, pointless to go diving into the abyss. I get into this with Candace Owens stuff and some of these other people. You're saving a system that shouldn't be saved. Anyways, let's get into it here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Saturday, I believe it's here, I can just check it right here. I have the date right here. It's the 15th of November. 2,780-year-old Israelite tablet finally translated to reveal its message. Persia is only weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. Now, this is, a good meme, a good joke. But in reality, like in the Mahabharata, there was mantras that could be used to create nuclear-charged arrows, which I don't, I mean, the people at that time or the people that, the story that would, arrows could be like a metaphor for missiles or whatever it might be. But it was there, like it's in the Mahabharata, like it's in the ancient text, like long before people knew about splitting the atom and knew about nuclear weapons. There was like spiritual mantras these guys could do. That was the ones that were taught these various things to create these, these weapons. Like it's a part of you could say it's a fictional narrative, but it was the idea was there all the way back 5,000 years ago. Just a little tidbit, but this is still funny here. Okay, then this meme, American politicians are prostituting themselves to AIPAC, which of course we now know about the honeypots in terms of Cash Patel. There's a song. I have some stuff to get to. Candace Owens had some kind of, I'm not going to show the video clips, but I'll talk about it. Meghan Kelly defended Trump over Epstein in the most gross way. And one of my viewers tipped me off to an old video of Erika from Law, which we'll get into a little bit. It's a long interview, and I don't know how I'm going to find the good parts, if there are some, or the interesting parts. But she did that with that Calvary Christians and a lot of stuff. Candace Owens was talking about how Britney Spears's what was that word for it? I'm just waking up here. The financial arrangement she had where her dad was taking her money, the conservatorship went through Calvary Christian, and so she's got, according to her, she's got all this stuff, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But there was a story, and I got to get these images. Let me find these images that went around on Reddit, and I think it's kind of a fake story. I mean, I felt it was fake since the beginning. Let me find the images here. So my wife sent me this. There was a Reddit post maybe last night or 2 nights ago, probably not last night, but 2 nights ago. She sent me. So Thursday night, it went up on Reddit, and I'm not sure. I guess this picture at least has been verified. And there was a post of a Jeffrey Epstein email, and there was an exchange, and it was like, it looked like they took a legitimate email and then added a line that had a different font, and it was kind of bolded. And I can't show it to you because it's been removed by Reddit. And I kind of thought it was fake when I saw it, just because it just seemed, whatever it is. But what Jeffrey Epstein said was, like, remember that time Trump blew Bubba, meaning that Trump performed oral sex on what they called Bill Clinton Bubba, right? And so I dismissed it, and I'm like, and maybe I asked ChatGPT or one of these things. I just asked Gemini, and the email's been removed, the post on Reddit. So either they're suppressing it, which of course they might, because it's kind of fucked, because it's kind of a game changer. But I don't think it's real. But whatever, like it, and even if it's a real email, doesn't mean that it really happened, because Jeffrey Epstein, seems to be somebody who just says outlandish things. Remember, you had that portrait of Bill Clinton in a blue dress. But either way, it went around Reddit, and it's significant enough that my wife said, well, there are all these memes now. She sent me a couple. That, like, every third post on Reddit was about this. So it was a removed email that at least, is gaining some traction because of, it's a bombshell claim, and, it's funny. So this was an old picture that was posted about it, and so where Trump's hand is kind of near Clinton's crotch. So then this was posted, Donica Lewinsky. This is gross. Let's move on from this one. I mean, I didn't like the idea of it. Like, I didn't like having the idea that happened. That's one of the reasons I didn't cover it, because it was like, I don't even want to think that happened. Like, it's just too gross, right? Realizing the phrase "big beautiful bill" now has more meaning. So like I said, I think it's fake. I asked Gemini about it, and first I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT wouldn't answer because it allegedly has some standards, right? They said he couldn't, based on their whatever code they have there, whatever they're allowed to talk about, they weren't allowed to talk about things of that nature in terms of oral sex, I think. So, and then Gemini said it's likely a hoax, but wasn't confirming it. So it could be real. Like, it could be real. And it could be real from the standpoint that these people are so depraved, I was thinking about, like, just the ages when this would happen. I don't know when the email was dated, right? And I don't know how long ago, but they were, like, in their 60s or 70s. Bill Clinton didn't he have, like, a complete heart surgery? So, whatever. I mean, they're just old guys, and so whatever. But, it's going around. Like, it's something where people are talking about it. And this is why Donald Trump is fucked. Like, because, some of his people will never leave him. But, I was, like, joking with my wife. Donald Trump had that video where he said, I could shoot someone in the face on Fifth Avenue and I'll never lose any supporters. But you can't blow Bill Clinton and get away with it, right? Your supporters are going to leave you if you shoot somebody in the face, but they find out Bill Clinton shot in your face. Those people will, ditch you. He's not going to survive that. And, whatever else is in there, like, he's fucked. So anyways, let's move on from this. So this is Tim Dillon. It's kind of funny. And we'll get to the more serious stuff here in a second. But, I don't take any. It's all a joke. So, but let's start here.
We get any of her music up, or will we get a copyright strike from the FBI? If we play Kash Patel's girlfriend's country music, will we get a copyright strike from the feds? Because I'm curious, by the way, if she's a country music sensation, I would just like to know that. I would like to know that. I'd like to be... I
think if we just play a little bit, it'll be okay.
Okay.
They're talking about Kash Patel's honeypot girlfriend, which, is another thing. Like, they're so fucked right now. Like, I mean, when you sue people the way Kash Patel's suing these are right-wing, kind of whatever it is, truth-oriented type people he's suing. And people who have a big audience, internet audience. They, one of them has a $5 million business, right? And it's being covered now by Candace Owens and these other people, Tim Dillon and stuff like that. And so I'm sure it might be mentioned on Joe Rogan, these other places. And so, this is not Democrats coming after you. These are people who, and Kash Patel used to be a podcaster that, delved into these so-called conspiracy theories that he's now condemning these people for. I mean, they're imploding. Like they're this isn't going. The Democrats aren't getting them. Like Trump's trying to go after the Republicans, who are trying to get these Epstein things out. And it's already the stuff that's out there already should be enough. Like there was enough stuff before any of this. Trump incriminated himself by his behaviors and his statements. Like he's a depraved fucking elitist piece of shit, right? With perverted sexual tendencies, banging porn stars and walking into the dressing room of teenage girls because he owns the pageant and bragging about it on Howard Stern. And we know what kind of guy he is. Like you just don't want to, his supporters just don't want to see it. Anyways. Woman for Trump.
Old school was mainstream. Radio was always clean. People read the news and angst. Steel guitar was on everything.
On everything. It's hard for me to evaluate good country music. I mean, there's a few songs of country music I like, but for the most part, it's not my thing, and it sounds kind of similar, so it's hard for me to say. I mean, if this is her actually singing, maybe she has to. At least she can, carry a country music tune.
Folks signed up to hear straight sing. Rock this down on every king. Drop a needle down on a vine. Her windows down, just driving 4 miles.
Vinyl and miles don't rhyme. And, no one uses vinyl now. So what are you talking about?
It feels like it's been
And she goes, Israel! They're like, no, hold on. You didn't get the lyrics? You didn't get the lyrics? Tel Aviv, I've been in Tel Aviv. It's such a pretty sea. I love Tel Aviv. Israel is for me. I love Kash Patel. Indians don't smell. That's a stereotype. I'm just a country star. I met him at a bar. I'm not a Mossad plant. Why would you say that? Why would you say that? There's lots of files in the office. It's impossible to say which ones are Jeffrey's. Let it go. She releases a song. Let it go. 'Cause we're proud Americans. We're concerned with our families. We don't need to see no files. Mind your own business. Mind your own business.
I mean, put it on Spotify, put it on iTunes. I want to download it. It feels this way. It feels like that is the country song right now. We're proud Americans. We don't need to see no files. All we get is fed slop every day, all day. Yes, I am. I'll record that with you, Tim. I will you and I will drop a country song because it'll just be called Fed Slop.
Okay, so Friday's post from Candace Owens. I can listen to this stuff. See, these are long videos, and most of it I don't care about, and I'm not going to cover it here. But she had, this claim that all of these stories and interactions with people that she has been covering for years are all converging, like this stuff with Macron and all these other things. So she started talking about she played a clip from this woman who's one of these types of Candace Owens truthers who was getting into the Britney Spears conservatorship, and the woman had a lot of documentation about how the Calvary Christian, this church that she's been covering, right, which I'll show you, Erika basically endorsing that particular segment. Calvary is a military term, the horse soldiers. And so it's I always thought that was weird. And I was out west, and I don't know where I had some sort of interaction with some kind of, there was something. Either I saw something, or there was a news story, or I was somehow at one of these places. I don't know. So something was, there's something there. And I remember thinking it was a weird, name for a church because it's a military name, right? What does the Calvary have to do with Jesus? But there's and it's one of these sort of newer churches, I believe, and it has whatever it is, questionable morals or whatever it might be. So she gets into MK Ultra. Well, first of all, she was talking about Rob McCoy, and in her last post, Candace Owens was saying that Rob McCoy took over some Christian church that had financial issues, and that he took over, and then he took all the money from that church and put it into his own church. And some guy wrote to her and said, "You have it all wrong because you're just reading mainstream media reports about this. What really happened was this church was making money, because that's the most important thing, right? And it's doing well financially. But Rob McCoy came in, and he got on the board of directors, and he ended up basically having a hostile takeover of that church, right? So, and he ran this Calvary Christian bullshit thing. And so she gets into this stuff about MK Ultra mind control, and she talks about Courtney Love, I guess, who she met, and some of these other things. When she first met Kanye said, "Are you an op?" Because all these celebrities get run by these people, right? Get run by these, and she gets into how whenever there's big money, there is, people come in and try to glom it. Like Courtney Love said it was a big operation. Like this is a big operation where anybody makes too much money, they find a way to glom it. She talked about how they did this with Michael Jackson, and these people, they just come in and they find some way to glom onto this money. She had said that she proved that Michael Jackson wasn't really a pedo, which I do not believe at all. And I know there's always these people that show up Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson went on an interview talking about how he had these kids come over his house and they were sharing a bed. And so if he wasn't a pedo, he was really creepy because you just don't do that. That's totally inappropriate. These kids and it was always boys that would come over, and they were like they slept in his bed every night, these kids, which all these kids described. And, I mean, if he isn't a pedo, it's fucking bad decision making. It's weird. So whatever. But she was talking about how they glom onto this, they got all of Michael Jackson's money, his daughter Paris, his daughter Paris in air quotes, whatever that fucking weird shit happened, because those are not his biological kids or whatever. But, that whole thing. But I covered this a long time ago, like long before this stuff came up and these people were involved, like these right-wing people like Candace Owens. And what happens is, it happened with Prince and Michael Jackson and, all these other guys, Chris Cornell, all these people who die. and this is 100%, logical. This part of it, what she's talking about, and what I'm going to describe here. When you have like Prince and Michael Jackson and any artist who really isn't ever going to produce new content, right? They're not going to make new music, or no one's good. Their best days are behind them, and so their music isn't valuable anymore. They're not going to put out concerts as much. Or so remember Kanye? She talked about Kanye, which I covered a long time ago when it actually happened. Long before these guys got to this stuff, like we were covering this in the truth community. And Kanye went on a rant about Jay-Z and said, Jay-Z, don't send killers at my head. Remember, he went on a rant about Jay-Z and Beyonce. And they took him away. And he went to one of these, MK Ultra mind control reprogramming centers, whatever it is, and she gets into this mind control stuff, in a way that somebody who's more part of the beast would do it, like these people who, dabble in these things, they're just coming around to them. And then Kanye came out blonde. They often shave their heads like Britney Spears, when they get reprogrammed, right? But Britney Spears just shaved her head and she looked fucking weird. But you see all these women who shave their heads, or they come out, and oftentimes they come out with like if whatever hair is left, they dye it blonde, like you're a newborn baby. And Kanye came out blonde and he was reprogrammed and all that shit, right? But when you're not making new money, like you're not creating, when you're a creative person and the money people are no longer able to count on you making new content, and you're just going through your money, because now you have like royalty payments, right? You have remember Kanye was saying he was trying to own his publishing, and that was a big thing for Taylor Swift. She wanted to own her own, remember she made all that she redid her master copies because it was bought by that guy Scooter Braun, Justin Bieber's, handler. Remember Scooter Braun? He was, well, you know what? I have all these images. I'll put them in here. But Scooter Braun was watching videos of little boys singing at 2:00 in the morning. He watched Justin Bieber on YouTube and then made him into a big star. And so, all the creepy stuff. I see if I still have that file, but there's a song that they put all these images. Fans drew pictures. And some fan drew a picture of a pig humping another pig. And so I was trying to find the image. I just went to try to find it. And I couldn't remember what folder. So I used to make image videos, right? I didn't have the ScreenFlow app and all these things, so I would make just videos with images. And I have folder upon folder all these various images. And I'll put all these images in here specifically about this one song. And Justin Bieber did a song with this band called Skrillex, something. Doesn't matter. Don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. And all these fans drew images. And there was an image of these two, like a pig humping another pig, and Justin Bieber is standing in front of a microphone. And, I'll put that image in here, so for this part. And he is, he says, and in the other image it said, "Damn you, Scooter." And they were right next to each other in the video. And somehow I stopped, like I always do, where the two images merge, where Justin Bieber appears to be looking at one pig humping another pig, and he says, "Damn you, Scooter." And the scooter has the two eyes over the U, the U with two dots over each of the sides of the U, which is a symbol in when you have a PC that if you type in 666, this symbol comes up. I forget, there's like you have to touch, like you have to hold down control something or whatever. But there's a way you can search for it if you really want to, But it was a part of this U was used in the title of the song. But it was a weird thing. And that whole thing with Scooter Braun, and he just seems to be a real handler and a real creep, all this stuff. And he bought Taylor Swift's masters, and there's a whole drama with that. I don't know if it's staged or what, but they want to own their publishing, because what happens is you get older, and you're an older person, and people forget about you. Your audience ages out, and you may or may not still want some fame, but oftentimes you're just burnt out, and you're not making new content, and you're just hemorrhaging the money. You have this money that's coming in through royalty payments when your song is used here and there. And so you have some money still coming in, but you're not creating something new. So you're worthless to these bean counters, these money handlers, right? Just like an athlete, when they retire, they can sort of do some things. They're still somewhat famous, but they're no longer as valuable as as a producer. They're not doing what their craft anymore, their art. As an athlete, as playing sports, and then these other people. So it just makes sense to kill him, like to kill Prince, and then take his royalty rights. He also had, remember, Michael Jackson had just bought the all the publishing of the Beatles. He owned all the Beatles songs and all that stuff, and so they just come in and they glom it. Remember, there's this guy Randy Quaid. Is Dennis Quaid's brother. He's a kind of a goofball. He's in the 4th of July and some of these other movies, Independence Day, and some of these other things. You guys know who he is. And he claimed that they just kicked him out of Hollywood and they stole his home. Like he owned a home outright. And they just came in and took it and said, we own this home. The same kind of people they're talking about. And he said he had all this documentation. He was like living in Canada. And he was just going after all these people. He's kind of went on a psychotic break where he was just, saying all these things. And nobody believed him, and his brother disavowed him, like they just, whatever. But, like this kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Like you are somebody who produces content, and then when your time is up, they just take it and, they, whatever, put you out to pasture, or they just kill you and take your stuff. Your whatever you have left, your assets that are valuable. And these Illuminati type blood sacrifices. I covered this quite a bit years ago. I've lost interest in it. Of course, things have changed, different times. But Candace Owens is getting around to this. And then, she talked about MK Ultra mind control. And so years ago, this is a pivotal thing that happened in my life. So, I was looking into things. And, for example, one of the things that always bothered me was Gaddafi, right? What happened with Gaddafi. That they invaded Libya, and it just was unjustified. You could just see that he was actually a good leader for his people. His country was doing well. The UN itself said Gaddafi was reaching the Millennium Development Goals that no one else was reaching. He took the poorest country in Africa and turned it into the richest country in Africa. And he was putting the money from the country, their oil and some of these other things, he was putting it back into the country. He invested. And he created this way of drilling down and taking glacial water and pulling it to the surface and using it in farming and all these things. It was like he won awards for that shit. And they just killed the guy and took his country and just all this stuff. And the UN ordered it. And so I was getting into the UN, like people go through the truth community. If you go through the various narratives, you learn about MK Ultra mind control and the UN and all these things. And, at that time, I found that my spiritual organization, Master Chargy, the guy that was there when I was, started, he was in the last years of his life. It was 2011. And he had suffering major health issues. And he just wasn't able, he had been able to micromanage it, all the stuff up until that point. But he was surrounded by these guys, and they made a lot of money, and they donated money, and they were, a lot of them lived in America, and they're kind of assholes. And they had been what's called the Sura kings, demonic kings in India in the past. I had a past life as one of these people. That's why I understand these things, because I lived it, right? And I was on the other side of the thing. I have a whole thing about that I've talked about in the Journey series. But, these guys were they had to be kept under close watch. And he actually condemned them in a talk where he said these people, the so-called inner circle, he said they're the worst. He said they have the worst character qualities, so he just fucking lit into them, right? But, they were surrounding him, and some of them wanted to make the Sajmark system into an NGO, like one of these non-governmental organizations. And in India, it's a big deal. It's kind of like a badge of honor. There was at that time, there was an NGO for every 460 people in India, there was an NGO. So think about that. You have whatever billions of people, 1.4 billion people in that country, and there's that many NGOs. And so I got into it with these guys, and I explained why it was bad, and what the UN was, and how it was perceived, and they were just dickish about it. And I realized, that these are the same people that have wrecked the system with Kamlesh Patel now. And I saw how the UN gets their claws into these organizations, and luckily the UN really didn't get too deep into it. I don't know what in terms now with Kamlesh Patel. I'm sure it's much worse. Now with this heartfulness thing that they've created. But because I went through a personal experience with it, I saw it at a deeper level. And so there's a time where my ex was, I was learning about MK Ultra mind control, and there was all these stories from these people who said that they went through it. And it was hard to verify, and there were, these various women and people that were, turned into these beta sex kittens and whatever. There was like videos about. I think all these things have probably been deleted now. And it was hard to verify whether this shit happened or not, right? Like if this stuff, like there was a woman who had her name. She was a whatever. It doesn't. I'm not going to say her name because I don't know it. But she had the part of her vagina was they carved it into making it look like the face of the devil. And she had people take photos of it and verify that had been done to her, right? And so, but she was psychologically broken and was not a reliable source. But the things that they were saying, my ex's dad was like a CEO of a major corporation. He had her story was he had abused her, and she had fractured she had these psychological breakdowns. She would get suicidal. She was hospitalized. This was her story. She had tried to commit suicide twice, and she had these moments where she would just have these psychotic breakdowns. And when I was researching MK Ultra stuff, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what she does. Like she had been sexually abused, and she had this. She broke mentally. Now I don't think that she was a part of the program, although possibly. But either way, she exhibited the same issues. Like some, when kids are sexually abused, they have these. They can be, they can break down to these altered personalities. There's the Manchurian Candidate. There's movies. So I was into this whole thing. I'm not into it, but I was researching it, and I was like, holy shit, there's real life proof for me. Like this is my ex. When we would argue, she would run and get a knife and threaten to cut herself or commit suicide. Like my kids, I always had to hide the knives, but even my kids at some points were hiding the knives when there would be an argument. And she would try to push me into these arguments that I would just go numb. Like I would just withdraw completely because I knew that it would lead to these psychotic breakdowns. It was a fucking nightmare. I've talked about this extensively in the Journey series. And so, at some point I said, look, and I showed her some video clips. And I said, this thing seems to have happened to you. And she got sometimes she would age regress and turn into like a little girl. Like she would have this mental break. And she said, if I look at this stuff, if I try to fix it, I think I'll become a schizophrenic and I'll be institutionalized the rest of my life. Like she didn't want to look at this as a possibility. So, I have personal, whatever experience of that this stuff is real. These mind control programs have been documented. Bill Clinton was released some of these things, and when some of this stuff came out, and they wanted to control people's minds all the way back to that book by Edward Bernays called Propaganda, where TV was used. And we think about now, with all the content we have and all the screens, but this is back in the 30s, the 40s, whenever, that he wrote this book. You can look up this book called Propaganda, and that he could control people through the television, which was just becoming a thing, right? And so, they often want to control. I mean, they always want to control the masses, and mind control is a good way to do it. And everybody is being mind controlled in some way or another. All of us, because of the system, the way it is, right? The way that they have learned to do this, the way that they can guide the masses in the direction that they want, and the two-party system and the political system and certainly religions and all these things, they can, they can sort of get a hold of you in one way or another, depending on your personality type. You fit into various categories, and they're able to do this, and it's a fucked up thing, right? And the people who have lots of money, they come up and they grab all this stuff. And so Candace Owens was talking about all this stuff in terms of the Calvary Christian Academy, which again I'll get into with Erika Franzve in a moment. And so this morning I picked up where I left off from her, like I was doing some stuff in the kitchen. And she said this. I want to show you this one clip about this. Okay, so I just ate breakfast, and I wanted to, let me just show you kind of, I don't want to say, I'm going to show you more of this than I originally was going to intend. I was just going to talk about the first part here. But then I played a little bit more, and I realized there's a lot here. She talks about how all religions were compromised. And, the thing that I have to offer here, I often see these guys present stuff, and sometimes they get things, they're on the right side of things. These controlled opposition, whatever you call them, shills, disinformation, whatever you want to say, about the people who are in the show, like Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan and Candace Owens, but they get some things right. Or even mainstream media sometimes gets things right. There's actually truth that comes out. Now, of course, they're going to wreck it, right, at some point. But even when they're working to tell the truth, or the truth is coming through them, they're limited because of their perception, experience, and orientation about the material world and about saving the system. Like almost everybody who, these mainstream people, but most of the people in the truth community, they're limited because there's always, everything's framed in saving the system. That somehow this system is worth saving, that this system can be saved, and that it should be saved, and none of those things are true. The system can't be saved, it shouldn't be saved, and whatever the other thing was, the other thing, and the other thing that's wrong. And so, and not seeing it from a spiritual perspective, always looking at material benefit and not spiritual benefit. Like, how does this benefit me spiritually? And so it's a unique perspective that I have here, not that it should be, but most people don't have it. Like, they just don't have it because they haven't had the experience, because, we have spiritual deprivation here in America. So you're going to get stuff here that's unique in terms, at least in terms of the truth community. I mean, it's not unique in terms of the information's out there about all this stuff. People just don't access it or want to access it or want to, it's inside of you. It's information that you have inside of you that you just don't want to see, right? It's something that it changes everything in a way that it represents a loss of control for your ego. But let's start here. So we'll get into it.
Onto their radar by making too much money. Like, as soon as there's like layers of this, and first they're going to try to offer you a job and try to control you, blah, blah. And then if they can't control you, they will try to destroy you. But their goal is to just successfully infiltrate, right? Curiously. And
so this is what I was talking about earlier. So she has, some truthful information here about what happens, because I can say 100%, and you don't have to have any factual information to figure out why this would be the case. If you're a celebrity, if there's a celebrity out there and you're making content, you're a creative person, there's all the people who created internet stuff, right? Created the tech bubble. All these people who made companies, and they were into making cell phones or making YouTube or, these types of things, right? And then there's the people who run the financial end of it that don't know shit about coding. They don't know shit about the creation of things, but they know how to make money on the scam of a public offering of the company. And they come in, and you can go through the history of all these companies, that became billion-dollar companies. And the people who created it, the creative inspiration, the creative people, the people with vision, visionary people, people who are connected to divinity, who channeled this information, And they're really just into the creation. They're not even into money that much. Whatever extent. They don't get dick from it. They get nothing. They get peanuts. Where these bean counters, these money people come in, and they make a fortune off the creative material. Now, they can't create things for themselves. I've talked about this before. The controllers need our creative energy to manifest things because they're so disconnected from the divinity within them. They can't manifest things. They can only parasite off of other people's creative content and creative energy. And so you have these artists who created content, and they find a way to grab onto it, especially when the artist is used up and is done, and they're no longer creating things. So they kill them and they take their shit, right?
I'm going to read this to you or else you won't believe me. She kept insisting to me through many messages that I needed to look into the quote unquote Mormon mafia, which she said sits above Hollywood and even sits above many Zionist Jews. Now, I want to be very clear because this can be offensive to people. Every faith has been infiltrated. Okay, we know that things are corruptible. This is not an attack on and saying every person in the Mormon church is involved, every person, the Catholic, no. But we know that at the top, things get corrupted. It's just a fact. And
when it does get corrupted, which she's leaving out here, 'cause she's going to get into Jesus and Christianity and still being a good Christian, despite the corruption of these religions, and you can't do that. Because the religion itself has been corrupted. I'm gonna go through all the stuff she says here, and then I'll cover these various points in a voiceover. And so it's good that she's saying all religions are corrupted, because people should hear that. And most people can't. Most Christians can't hear that, because it's destabilizing to them, right? Because the good Christians that are connected to Christianity and working to be good Christians can't hear that, right? They can't hear that their system has been corrupted, because it hasn't been corrupted today, which is the problem with her view here. It was corrupted 2,000 years ago, and I'll get into that in a bit, right?
you are actually a person that cares about your soul and you want to get into heaven, your job is not to defend corruption, whether it's happening in your church, in your backyard, in your own home. Your job is to try to root it out. And I'm sharing this text message because it's...
So this is another... See, this is where she... And let's say she's sincere. Because, you know, all these people who are controlled opposition, all these people who are shills, you know, this has happened over and over again. You're playing a part and you get into the part, right? You can see that a little bit with Alex Jones. Like, Alex Jones has been controlled forever. And yet he's, you know, there's part of him that was into it. Like, you get into your role, right? Even, you know, actresses and actors, they get into their roles. They start believing that they're that guy or that person, that character. And so, you know, whatever these people are in terms of their control, you know, they get into this stuff. And they start saying things. And, you know, they're controlled and they have to... There's certain things they can't say, and they have to warp things in their perspective. But let's say she was sincere, that this is just, she's organic, and this is her just saying those things. But her saying is your job is to fight the corruption. You can't fucking fight the corruption in the Catholic Church. What, you shit me? You think you're gonna fix it? You can't fight the corruption in the government. It's been ruined. It's been wrecked. It's been totaled. You can't do shit about it, right? Like, that's the issue here. They don't get that. You can't do that. You can't fix any of these things. You're fighting a losing battle. So you understand that these things have been corrupted, then what do you do? Like, what are your... If you can't fix it, then what are your options? And almost 99.9% of the truth community is stifled at that point. You know, and I talk about regularly here, and people don't want to hear it because it means that you have to change dramatically, and you have to do a lot more, and just to, you know, just to start off and live a spiritual life. Like, you have to distance yourself. You have to graduate from your corrupt organization, and you have to connect to divinity within you. And then that's just the beginning point of a fucking massive, overwhelming, infinite journey, right? So people don't want to hear that shit. You know, they want something that solves the problem right now and, you know, feels good or sounds good. Oh yeah, we'll fight the corruption in these major religious organizations. We'll fight it and win, right? Come on, bro. Like, just stop it.
Crazy that at the time that she sent it, I was like, I don't know any of this. I'm not up on... She mentioned Lou Taylor, and I'm like, what are you talking about? So I'm going to read this to you, okay?
I think she's talking about
took a
Courtney
screenshot
Love
earlier
here.
today. She says, you're missing the critical parts, the bright, white, and delightsome, the original Nephites. So who is it that doesn't drink, doesn't gamble, but they run Vegas? And a lot of the Jews that are in Hollywood, Lou Taylor for Kim Kardashian and Diddy, Jay-Z, Beyonce, and she also owns the church home, to get Bieber from Hillsong. I looked that up. That actually is accurate. It looks like she owns or sat on the board of Church Home. I know you Bieber people that were doing the videos about that know a lot. That seemed to be accurate. It made no sense to me at the time because I'm not hip. I don't follow a lot of the Hollywood stuff.
She's not hip.
And she says Christian non-denominational, but she's LDS, born and raised LDS. Bill Gates' grandfather, also LDS.
So, it becomes something where, she was on the Zionists. The Zionists control everything. Now it's like the LDS. This is this thing, people go through this stuff. The LDS is weird. I've talked about this. There's a young woman has videos, and my wife and I watched that great movie Heretic. And so this video popped up. I did some searching for things about Heretic. It's a great movie in various ways. It's a horror movie, but it's like well worth watching. I think my wife wanted to, I don't know if we watched it twice. I watched it twice, but she wanted to watch it again. And there's creepy parts at the end, like horror shit. And we're not horror movies people. But it just, some of the dialogue and just the performances and the point of it and all of it, right? And how, religions are controlled and it's about control. Religions are about control. So this young woman who was an ex-LDS member has these videos, and we watched a few of her videos, and they get redundant after a while. And I knew some former LDS people when I was out west, and there's a lot of weird shit there. And then other stuff came up. There was some it stars that guy used to the one character from Friday Night Lights, and he's been in a bunch of good movies. He did a good interview with Joe Rogan that's kind of worth listening to. But my wife and I watched Heretic, and then we went on a trip, so we listened to a few of this young woman's things about the LDS, the church. And there was American Primeval. It's a very graphically violent miniseries about the frontier and then going through Utah. And it talks about the early stages of the LDS church grabbing hold of Utah, whatever it might be, the state. And they dress up like Native Americans, and they were stopping everybody, all the pioneers from going through and killing them and slaughtering them so they could have a majority. It was a whole thing. But, this is a never-ending rabbit hole of control, right? But there's a point here I want to get to, and I want to go to a voiceover. But now she's on the LDS stuff. She was on Calvary Christian, which I guess may be associated with that. She was on that, And this, it's like watching the truther version of Lost. No, it's these guys. No, it's this thing. No, it's that guy. And then, throwing in celebrity names. I understand why people, and she's got the #1 podcast because of it, right? But there's no point. She doesn't have a point. Because if you have this vague idea that we're fighting corruption by just diving into the cesspit regularly and blaming this group or that group and just going through the various stages of who does what and who Rothschilds do this, the UN does that, and the Zionists do this, and the whatever, the Jesuits do that, and the LDS does this, and then that, and this is the celebrities, and these are people, and but somehow we're fighting corruption. No, you're not fighting shit, right? You're just a never-ending fucking. This is the problem with the truth community. You're on this never-ending, unresolvable path through the cesspit of humanity, right?
Polygamist, not hard to dig any of this stuff up at all. The corrupt Fed who called off the 2006 investigations into CNB Bank for Mike Hurt's estate and Tupac. And then this is a question mark. R. Todd Nielsen, that firm is still massive, but he had to then go be one of the 12 apostles to the new prophet in Salt Lake, and with Ensign and NGO. And she goes on, and she starts speaking about this. And
Yeah, you go on and on, right? Because, how is this resolving something? You just go down, oh, now there's something new I found. I found something else that's like, this thing. And this is what people into, because people don't want a solution. They don't want to work. They don't want to change themselves. They don't want to, but there's the thing here about the hippies that I want to go to our voiceover.
I receives, I just had no idea what she was speaking about. I didn't have time to look into any of this, and it did not seem relevant because at that time I was very much investigating the Brigitte Macron thing, and was arriving very quickly at this weird backstory of MK Ultra and the Haight Asbury Clinic, when it seems like a button was pressed in America and big psychological operations started to take place. And now, of course, we learn that this church that Lou Taylor's husband is a pastor at has this background that involves the CIA. They even explicitly tell the true story about all these hippies. Well, the hippie movement was not organic. It was not real. It was a psychological operation. That is a fact, okay?
It's not a fact. So I got a deeper explanation of the hippie movement. I'm going to start off there, and then I'll explain the rest of this stuff.
It is not a crazy musing. It is simply a fact that they brought this, and this really became a way to ultimately attack the Christian faith, to divide the Christian faith. The story goes, these hippies decided.
Okay, so this is where, you're going to get information from me that you won't be able to get from the rest of these people. And, it's not just for people to be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, this is, changing the fundamental way that you see life and approach life. So let me go to a voiceover here. Okay, so I want to get into the hippie movement, the truth about, because she said that it's a fact that this was a CIA operation, and that's on one level true. But it's not really a fact, because there's something beyond that, right? There is a spiritual reason for it. And so, to start off with, she's coming from the perspective that the corruption of the Catholic Church and all these churches has happened recently, right? And the mind control is a new thing. But the only reason you think that Jesus is the only Son of God and the only way to get to heaven is because the corruption of the Catholic Church, of the Christian tradition, started right after Jesus died. And you should know this because what you see going on with Charlie Kirk. All of you and her. Candace Owens documented this. Not that Charlie Kirk is a spiritual person or a Jesus-like figure, but his body wasn't even cold, and all these fucking parasites and vultures. Vultures are wonderful animals, so they get a bad rap. Possums and vultures, they do a service by eating bacteria-laden food anyway. So I don't fucking. I just don't like I just don't like vultures getting a bad, but parasites and these things. They immediately set in and were glomming on to Charlie Kirk's legacy. She documented this one guy, Josh Hammer, pitching his book a day after Charlie Kirk was dead, that Charlie Kirk was really talking about his book. Like, she was mocking these people. And so the same thing happened with Jesus. Why the fuck wouldn't it? The moment Jesus died, or whatever happened, resurrection, whatever it is, when he disappeared, and certainly after his disciples, who weren't that great, they were struggling and they were all tortured and killed. When all those people disappeared, it set in immediately. It didn't take 2,000 years for it to be corrupted. What the fuck are you talking about, right? It's immediate corruption. And so when Jesus was alive, and if you looked at the purity of his message, the Old Testament was horseshit, which he knew, because he graduated. He's left Judaism. He became a spiritual person. This is where you leave your religion. Swami Vivekananda, a religion's a great thing to be born into, but a horrible thing to die in, because you have to transcend to being a spiritual person. You find divinity within you, and that he, more than likely, for me it's a fact. For you, it's an idea. But he went to India and learned yoga because that's the best place to do it. He learned some form of yogic practice where you connect with the divinity within you, and he brought it back to these dumb motherfuckers, and they killed him for it because that's what they fucking do. And this, especially in the West, the European areas, Middle East, the Western areas, and they glommed onto his message, And if you just took the purity of Jesus' message and the higher developed teachings, the kingdom of heaven's within, and these other things, the best of Jesus, if you took the most evolved message of Jesus, you wouldn't know his name right now. If it was just that, Jesus would never have gotten any more than a few, a dozen, a handful of true devotees of disciples. He would only got a handful of people, and the organization, or let's say Jesus left a legitimate successor or spiritual representative in St. Peter or whatever it was, right? I mean, St. Paul was, a spiritual, high developed spiritual soul. And so even if Jesus had left one successor after another, and they all embodied the Christ, they were all, some form of the Christ. They had reached the level of Christhood. Jesus the Christ, right? Like the Master. Jesus the Master. If they had reached some level of mastery, the tradition would have barely any people. Even if there was the same energy that Jesus had, if that still existed today in some pope or some fucking guy, right, whatever, there would be almost no people doing it, right? So when they took hold of Jesus' teachings, these people who corrupt, these mind control people, they warped it to benefit them and the organization. And they did this over many, the Council of Nicaea, these various, historically, they took out certain teachings and they brought in other ones and they emphasized certain things. And they dumbed it down for dumb fucks. Because dumb fucks couldn't do what Jesus did. And Jesus was on the first rung of spirituality. He wasn't that far evolved. Miracles are something that you can do within, a short period of time. But you're not supposed to. And Jesus actually did miracles that he wasn't supposed to. Because you can only use spiritual powers if God or these higher developed beings that oversee everything, they're like your spiritual handlers, right? So I'll get into that in a moment, right? So there's a whole thing I have to say about that. But some of what Jesus was doing was like showing off, at least in terms of the official story. There are things to convince people, this guy did miracles. Yeah, fucking miracles aren't that hard. But there are consequences if you do miracles and it's not ordered by God. If you disturb the divine plan, like raising Lazarus from the dead, if God ordered it, sure. But, otherwise, God wanted Lazarus dead. Lazarus was supposed to be dead. Only if God said, hey, let's bring Lazarus back, yeah, sure. But that didn't happen. Like, these are things where Jesus was doing things because he could, or whatever that was. I don't know, It's a 2,000-year-old story, but the point is, Jesus was in the first stages of his spiritual consciousness, and his higher level stuff would be too much for the average dumb fuck. It just is. It's sad, but it's the case. So these controlling people, these mind controlling people, these people want to manipulate the masses. They glom onto the teachings. They're not godly people or spiritual people. They don't love Jesus. They see it as an option, an opportunity to control other people. And so they take some of the creative material, like we were talking about, Michael Jackson's songs and Prince's songs, and they glom onto the material because they can't create shit for themselves, and they warp it and they use it and they twist it in a way that they can control the masses, and they dumb it down because they need dumb fucks, and dumb fucks can't do the higher developed spiritual shit. And so that's what happened to Christianity. And then you were indoctrinated when you grew up in it and in the culture. Then you think Jesus is some wonderful, the most evolved person, the only son of God, because it's been manipulated and you've been mind controlled and you can't fucking work your way out of it. And most people can't go to be spiritual, which is fucking sad, right? And so, so that's the mind control happened, the indoctrination happened. So this system, all of these systems, they're corrupted from the very beginning. And I've seen this happen in past lives, because when it happened in this life for me, when I was doing Saj Marg, which is a wonderful system, the best system ever for connecting people to divinity. And it's like a Hail Mary. Like you get things in the system you don't deserve. Maybe based on some things you did in past lives. Because humanity's crumbling. And humanity hasn't embraced their higher nature, our higher nature. And so there's been, no real movement of significance. And we're getting to the point where we're going to destroy the planet, ourselves, and all this shit. So this was something to accelerate. Like it's a wonderful system because it's, giving you an opportunity to evolve in a way that you're not, you don't deserve and you haven't earned, and these things, which is always a problem, you know, with divinity. But there's just no other choice, right? There has to be a huge shift in consciousness of the human people. Look at fucking around you. Like, it has to come. It has to be done. Just on a side note, I was thinking this last night, so I'm going to include it here. It goes with this. So, I've had the opportunity to have incredible higher consciousness experiences through the transmission cleaning and the interaction with the master of the Sajmark system, right? Like, unbelievable stuff. Like, I can't even, some of the divine moments, even, just recent meditations. Like, I had a great meditation this morning and just connecting to higher levels, and just, it's amazing. But also, I worked with the dregs of society. I worked with teenage sex offenders as a counselor. My ex was someone who was sexually abused, and like all the stuff that, all the torture and shit that I went through with that, right? And I was thinking about this in terms of people saying I shouldn't swear, right? And so there's a lot of shit within these treatment centers that are just gross. And I've talked about some of these interactions. There's a kid who's he was a younger kid who was there was a young cottage for kids, and these kids would act out sexually, and they were like fucking toddlers. They were like from 4 or 5 years old to like 7 or 8 years old, and they would act out sexually all the time in ways that like there was a girl. I didn't work in this cottage, but some of the things that they told me, I'm like, I just don't think I could handle that, right? I mean, the kids I work with were 10 and up, and they were, and that was incredibly hard to see, but at least they were like kids. But there was a girl like 6 years old. One of my coworkers said she used to rub herself up against the chair because she had been sexualized at a young age. Like, I mean, just horrible shit, right? And so there was a kid in there who was acting out sexually, so they moved him to our cottage. He was like 7 or 8 years old. And we read his file. You had to read these kids' files. And his parents had trained him to do sexual favors from as a toddler, and to like pickpockets and steal and do shit like that, right? And his parents would pimp these kids out. Their parents were pimping him and his brother out. And, the kid was so fucked up, but he was not like a bad kid. Like, he didn't, but just weird, and, just all these things. And, you can't even express how icky it is to see these things, to know that this is what humans do to each other and do to kids. It's just horrible. Like, there's all these people who are Pizzagate people and QBs that are supposed to be out there fighting against sexual abuse and know nothing really about it. I mean, maybe they have some experience personally or, whatever it is. But when you see these kind of treatment center kids who live in hell, right? And I wanted to give 2 examples, and this is the first. So this kid, he gets a visit from his brother, and his brother comes in with a social worker. And I knew the kid's story, and his brother's like this cute little kid. He's wearing glasses. He's got like a little suit on with a bow tie. He's probably like 3 or 4 years. Maybe might be 5 years old or 6, but he looks like he's 3 or 4. He's probably undersized. And his social worker's there, and she's bringing him by to visit his older brother. And I'm like, why? What's going on? What's wrong with him, right? What's happening? And she goes, he's dying of AIDS. And he's like he looks like a 3-year-old fucking kid, like innocent, and he's coming to say goodbye to his fucking brother, right? And I'm like, holy shit. Like, I was like hit by something. Like, I was like knocked out of my body. And like, I stagger into the office, and I'm like, I almost felt like I wanted to die. It was just like this horrible thing. That this kid fucking had AIDS. Not just HIV, he had fucking AIDS. And he's saying goodbye. He's a 4 or 5 year old kid saying goodbye to his 7-year-old brother because they grew up in hell. And because his parents pimped him out, and he got AIDS from some fucking creep, right? And so, when people say don't swear, fuck you. Like that. You think that's the worst thing that's out there? Like, that's your little fucking bullshit Christian stuff. There's like hell going out there. But the story I thought about last night, I don't think I've ever told this story. So there was a kid, he was coming into our treatment center, and we have to read the kid's intake file. And this kid had sexually abused a toddler and described having to pick the kid up to do it. And we all read this, like we're all reading this. And he was sexually abused. And when the person sexually abused him, it might have been some family member, I can't remember. The kid described how the guy took a shit on him after he did it. This kid's probably like 5 years old. He was like 10 when he was coming to our treatment center. And he said, he described it as, it felt warm, but it was smelly. Like that was the description. And I know this because it's seared into my fucking brain, right? And when the kid showed up, he was just fucking greasy. Like he was fucking, like everybody just disliked this kid. Like he was just, he was, there was like people who have like almost like a grease on him. Like, yeah, this is like a 10-year-old kid, and his voice and everything, like everybody fucking hated him, right? You know, and I mean, I was doing the Sajmark system then, and, you know, I knew about some of these things. I didn't know as much as I know now about hatred. But, you know, as a counselor, as a person in this, and we're only making like fucking $9 or $10 an hour in 1993 or whatever it was. You know, so I mean, it's not like we're people who, not everybody had their college degree. And, you know, so a lot of these people are just, you know, normal people, and they don't have any background, no training, psychology training, and these things. So it's hard, you know, to separate your personal feelings to these kids who are just, they're all horrible, but this kid was the worst. Like everybody, he just, the way he talked, his mannerisms, he's just, like he was just so hateable, right? And, you know, this was his life. This is the stuff he went through. And as bad as all this stuff is, and I have so many stories about all these things, and as bad as these kids' lives were, you know, my brother told me shit when he was, and I'm not going to share these things with you, but he was counseling these vets, and like things that I can't even talk about. Like they're so horrific. Like I couldn't say them. I don't want you to hear them because I don't want you to have to live with this stuff. Like I wish my brother didn't tell me those things. Like things that these guys witnessed at war or they participated in. And my brother was, you know, he guarded poppy fields, and, you know, he did some seedy shit. Like he wrote a whole like book about Vietnam, which I read, and then we had discussions and like just the shit he saw and he had participated in. But the stuff that when he started counseling these vets. And there's a level of fucking depravity. You know, you read these things and you hear the stories and whatever. But if you're not, like, you don't experience some kind of contact with it. Like, you know, if I read the intake file, it's one thing. Like I hear these, you read these kids' stories. But then when you meet the kids, it's a fucking, you know, they're just, I mean, they're abominations. And they're little kids. And they're just going to get worse. And they're going to fucking, if they get out of these treatment centers and they get out of the system, they're going to hurt other people. If they, God forbid, they have kids and, you know, these things, and it's passed along. But anyways, going back to it. So I've had these experiences of unbelievably higher levels of consciousness. And I've met the highest of the high, like the master, the spiritual master that I knew from the Sajmark system was, you know, I can't even describe his, like, you have to be able to see something from above. You know, you can look down on somebody and pretty much nail their personalities. Like you could just talk about what they are as a person because they're less evolved than you, and they're, you know, whatever. People who are younger than you, these things. But someone who's on a different level that's higher than you, you really can't even conceive of them. Like you get, you know, an experience that's beyond what your capacity, because they're in a sense more than you are, right? And so, you know, the people who are less than you, you know, they're just, you can contain within yourself what those people are. But someone who's like a true spiritual master, they're just beyond anything. And so, and someone who's just a little bit more evolved than you, you can't, you know, even that. And so, shortly after he died, his successor, who I watched be brought up to that level. I watched Kamlesh Patel Daji be brought up to that level. I had had good experiences with him. I thought he had the capacity to, you know, embrace this new role he had. And he crumbled like a fucking card house. And all these pieces of shit, parasite motherfuckers that were around Master Charji, started to, contaminate the system. And so I watched this happen, and I knew I'd seen it before, whether I was around Jesus or I was, a disciple, or whether it was, probably more than one time I had watched this happen. I had been around when there was a higher developed soul, and then I watched the system get corrupted. And it happens fucking immediately, and it just gets worse and worse over years. These are religions. They get worse and worse over years. And so you can't salvage the corruption. The corruption is the religion. The reason that you're a Christian is because it's been corrupted. Because it was the purity of Jesus' teachings wouldn't appeal to 99.9% of Christians. If they met Jesus and they could go back. There's this country song of a person's, right, this country singer was saying, what it would be like if he got to meet Jesus in real life. And I'm like, you would have rejected the guy. If you saw Jesus the way he was, if you just his physical appearance, and then he told you the things that, spiritual people tell you, you'd crucify him again, right? Like fucking, that's the sad fact. I can 100% guarantee that. And so, by the time it gets to dumb fucks, it's been completely corrupted, the religion. And I can speak to this because the majority of people that come here to listen to me say these things, do whatever I do here, they're turned off by the spiritual part. They'll even leave. They'll like the other things, but they don't like to hear the truth about spirituality. They don't like to hear the truth about their religion. And they don't want to be told that they have to change and do something more. And it's just fucking remedial shit that I'm saying here. Occasionally there's some higher level stuff. But my higher stuff that's compared to my covering and mocking people and shitting on celebrities and politicians, which, those are the videos that get the most views. Those are the things like, I've kind of, don't do it as much as I used to. But those are the things that appeal to most people. And then, maybe they kind of like the spiritual stuff or they're dabbling in it. And it's just the beginning. Like it's just an entry point where you're leaving the idea that you're here to live your material life, an ego-based existence, to where you're going to live a soul-driven existence. I wrote a workbook called Soul-Driven Existence, where your soul drives your existence from a spiritual perspective. In your material life, you sacrifice your egotistical pleasures and pursuits to live a spiritual life. And people can't just even handle that fucking idea, right? I have a little kid's book called The Friend Within, My Friend Within, which is about God is inside of you, that divinity is inside of you. And, people don't even want to hear that. Like in the Eastern culture, they grow up with it. But America, these things, they don't want to hear it. They want to think of, they just want something external. They want to do whatever limited things a Christian tradition says you have to do, or not at all, and be an atheist and deny divinity. But nobody wants to work at it, change themselves and connect to divinity within, because they don't want to give up control of their miserable little shitty lives. And that's just the starting point. That's just spirituality 101. So I can speak from 100% experience that most people can't even contemplate becoming spiritual. And it's a time and place where it's a necessity, right? Humanity is going over a cliff in every conceivable way, economically, spiritually, morally, genetically, like every possible way. We're diving into the abyss. And there's one thing that we can do to avoid that, or to rise up from that, and that's to evolve spiritually in ways like in leaps and bounds, like not just, I get this idea that God's within me. I'm going to contemplate that for the rest of my life, and then maybe next life I'll do something. It fucking has to be done now. And, whatever. Like it has to. There's no, even everyone just turn around and running straight towards God, 100%, putting all their effort into it. That probably wouldn't be enough, but, people don't even want to they don't want to dip their toe into, when you go to the ocean and you put your little toe, your big toe in there and it's cold, and then maybe 2 hours later you're in the water, that's, you gotta fucking run and dive right now and then start fucking swimming. This is where we're at as, swimming in the divine ocean. And so going back to this hippie thing, right? So the second master of the Sajmark system, Babaji, he was Patanjali in a previous life. And his example, and it took me a while for me to fully understand this, but every little bit of his energy, you know how you let your mind wander, and sometimes it wanders on things that are like not great, and you have thoughts that are, maybe they're just daydreams, and they're kind of innocent, they're just whatever, fantasies, and you're thinking about whatever it is, you're daydreaming as a kid, and all these kind of things. Letting your mind just do whatever it does and have all these thoughts that have no real value. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but they're just, none of them are, you're just allowing your mind to run wild or whatever. This is why people have trouble meditating. And then all the other things that you do that are just pointless, from watching TV to any number of things, right? And Babaji didn't do any of that. Every thought that he had, everything that he did was to serve God. Like, he didn't want to use any of his energy in doing anything that was not serving God. Like, every moment, every instance, every thought, every action, every breath that he took, every particle of food that he ate, everything that he did was with the idea that it was there so he could serve God better. 100% dedicated to this in his waking hours. And when he'd go to sleep, he'd have the thought that while he was sleeping, that God would use him spiritually and these other things to do God's work, right? And there are divine beings, spiritual beings that are in charge of the weather, physical people whose soul, or either a disembodied soul, but usually a person who's born, that's in charge of all the things that are, that are available out there. All the, there's a soul that's in charge of the sun, right? All these things. And people don't understand that there's a consciousness in everything in nature, everything that's done, everything that's around you, anything, number of things, even if they're manipulating the weather, there's still a spiritual being that's behind the man-made manufactured storm. There's nothing that happens that isn't backed by divinity, right? And there are people who are given orders, and using their thought force, they make things happen. And Babaji was ordered to start World War II, for example. Like, World War II was something that the divine beings that are running this planet said, this is what we want you to do, because you have divine handlers. When you submit to the divine will, you're going to have these spiritual beings that are loving, beings that have your best interest at heart, but they're like your spiritual handlers, right? They're there to help you achieve your spiritual goal. Everyone has a spiritual support system. And he was able to intercommune with all these people. He intercommune with Jesus, mostly with his master Lalaji, and he was receiving orders, and he would do whatever they say. All these various spiritual beings that were involved with this movement, and he would execute these things. He would use his thought force and his will on this planet to make things happen. And one of the things he was told to do was to transmit this divine energy to all over the world, and it specifically took off in the West in the form of the hippie movement. That the religions suck, Christianity for those people mostly. In Europe and in America it was Christianity, and these other countries. And these religions were taking people in the wrong direction. And he was told to transmit to these people. And the ones who were capable would come and meet him, would come and find him in India. And they did, because there was a spiritual awakening that happened. Now, the CIA and the powers that be saw this thing, and they manipulated it, but they were working on behest of the divine as well. The hippie movement was a spiritual movement. Of course it got corrupted. Of course it got degraded. Of course there was, human failings, because that always happens. But there was a spiritual reason it was done by this guy Babaji. Like, he would transmit to, these various places, and then people who could pick up on it would end up being at his house in India. And they weren't sure even how they fucking got there, right? They heard a spiritual call on some level, and they started to pursue something. Like, they started taking interest in this. And there is, the spiritual capital of the world has always been India. It's a material pit, but there's been times where India was it was a crown jewel of the British Empire. It was when the British came in, they really degraded India, like just all of it. We know what happened there with the British Empire, but it was a materialistic pursuit, but the spiritual stuff. But long before that, there was a time where when 5,000 years ago, the Mahabharata, India was the center of the world, both materially and spiritually. There was when there's this guy who was the first person to sail around Africa and then end up in India, right? So they didn't have the capacity. The Vikings, there was a thing that happened in one of those Viking TV shows where Leif Erikson figured out, I think it was Leif Erikson, one of these guys, that you could have, he made a primitive compass because they couldn't sail in the ocean. You go out into the ocean and you have no idea which direction you're going and where land is. I mean, you have to have, very, the ocean is vast, right? And it takes, 3 months to go across, like long periods of time. My ex, for my kids were homeschooling, they were learning about Ireland because, there's both my ex and I, we had a town, Tipperary, in Ireland where we both had ancestors, which is weird, right? But we all both have connection to Ireland and an Irish heritage. And there was this book. I can't remember the name of the book, but there's this guy who was an explorer, and he built these. There was this idea that ancient people from Ireland had reached America even before the Vikings. There was some record of it, but their boats were made out of animal skins, right? And they had these boats that were animal skin boat, and they sailed across the ocean in these things, and nobody could believe it was physically possible. But he figured out how to build one of these boats, and he kept extra skins so they could redo the boat when they needed to, and he got this interesting crew. There's a movie about it too. Like some of the thing was documented. And he, sailed up to Iceland, and he, met people, and then went from there to America. Like he was successful in doing this, right? But before then, there was no way for people to sail, all the way to go around the Cape Horn in Africa. You're going down to when Africa is, of course, most of it's near the equator and very hot. But when you get down to the southern part of it, that part there, you're getting closer and closer to the South Pole, right? And he met this Indian merchant, and he had the biggest ship in all of Europe, this guy. And these Indian ships were 4 times the size of this guy's ship, whatever his name was, the guy who did this. Like he was credited with this whole like thing. Like they made this guy, they sound like this guy actually achieved this. And the merchant said, "Oh, you want to come to India? All right, so he put his 4 giant ships around this guy's ship. And the guy didn't want to go in the open ocean, so he just wanted to hug the coast. And this merchant brought this guy over to India, right? And so India had like inventions and things that are still being used today. There's a time where, they don't want you to know these things because it's like it's a pit, and you go there now and it's dirty and it's just whatever. But there was a time where it was a spiritual capital and a physical capital, the material capital of the world, right? Like there's different phases, and that was a phase. And it's just the best place to connect to God. Like I had my 3 years there and my other trips there had phenomenal benefit that, now I can achieve that here, the connection that I had. But back then, I needed the time there. I needed the ashrams. I needed time with the master of the system. And so, I still miss all those things, but I'm able to keep the connection without it. But it's just this wonderful place, right? And there's just ancient, information, spiritual information, yoga practices and experiences that people have. And these people were called there. And, Candace Owens is dismissing it because she has this arrogant attitude, just like Tucker Carlson was comparing Christianity to these other religions and spiritual movements. But, Christianity is probably the most materialistic of the religions. But Judaism's more demonic worship. But Christianity is really about materialism. It has very little spiritual stuff in there. And Christians have done well materially. And so they look at that as being a validation for their religion, but it just isn't. Your material life, wealthy people are usually not spiritual. In fact, it's harder to be spiritual. You could be a person who has a spiritual craving, and if you're really poor, it's hard. And if you're rich, it's hard. But if you're, middle class, it's the best. You'll probably reach your highest levels that you could achieve if you're like just, somewhere in the range of middle class, where you're not dealing with the soul crushing aspects of poverty, but you're not tempted away by opulence and wealth. So, this is just been documented over the years. But, these things that people do on a divine level, you have your motivation, your reason. Like all those hippies that made it over to India and met Babaji. And one of those guys, Fred, a Jewish hippie, from America, who was the preceptor who started me. And him doing that was essential. Like, I'm very grateful to Fred, certainly to the masters of the system, because I had this, this wonderful experience. But it was going to happen for me. Like, it was a destiny, which, I'm also grateful for. But it's bummed me out because, if it's left to choice, people just won't do it. And then some people have it as a destiny and they still fuck it up, right? And I've seen that. And so, going back to this, I was talking about that one kid at the treatment center. He was repulsive. Like, he had this energy where he would walk into the room and everybody hated him, all the kids, all the staff, his therapist, his, family, because of his, whatever he had become inside. But he's only a 10-year-old kid. And he's already like a fucking golem. But then I've had the experience of these people who they radiate divine energy and divine love, and it's just amazing. Like this higher level people. But there's a lot fewer of them than there are the golems. There's so many people that are just fucking scraping the bottom of the barrel, and most of humanity is, at 30%. Like if a saint is 100%. And a golem is, a demon is at 0% or 1%, then, most people are about 30%. Like, they don't, they're mostly tending towards being material piece of shit, right? And, and we live in a bad time, so that's, exacerbated. But that's, the sad fact. So there's just one more story, and I want to get into this other stuff. And so I was in Sri Lanka, and there was a guy who was a preceptor. He was an old guy that did the preceptor work for Sajmark. And Master Charji was doing spiritual work on Sri Lanka, and he said he needed a preceptor. And so this guy had this experience. So he was, he found out, and some guy came to India, somebody who I knew, like a guy who's kind of a chucklehead. But he gave this guy a Sajmark book, and the guy read it, and he was Tamil. He was from the Tamil. He was a Brahmin. He spoke Tamil. The majority of people in Sri Lanka are Sinhalese, and the Sinhalese are kind of ethnically cleansing the Tamil people. This guy, there was a kid who was a preceptor, and the Sinhalese came to his house. This kid's 18 years old, and he was Tamil. And they came and took his dad when he was 10, and he hasn't seen his dad since. They just came to his house and plucked his dad out of the house, right? So, these people are living under some prejudicial circumstances. And this guy read the book, and he was wanting to go to India and meet Master Charji. And he was like a chain smoker where he would light his one cigarette with another. He would smoke packs of cigarettes a day. And he was, there was a vicious rainstorm. Some of these, tropical places have these horrific rainstorms. And he ran out of cigarettes. And he knew he had to give up cigarettes to become spirit. He knew like he was a problem. And he had a bunch of cigarettes hidden in case some storm happened, he couldn't go out. And he was dying for a smoke. And he went to his place where he put them in the ceiling. His wife had taken them, or some rat grabbed it and fucking took it away or something. And his cigarettes were gone. And he just stopped smoking. And he was like, and then he went to India, and he had this experience. He was made a preceptor, and he was telling everybody this story. And there's this French guy named Guy who was he was one of the more spiritual people. He made a good movie for Sajmark called Heaven. He was describing the ashram, and I had some, I travel with Guy a little bit, so I knew him a little bit. And he said to the guy tells him this story, and Guy goes, "Do you want to hear the real story?" And the guy goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I was with Charji. And Charji was talking about how he wanted he was being called to put a preceptor in Sri Lanka. And he said he scanned the whole country and he found this guy. He's telling Guy this. He told Guy this before this guy, had become a preceptor. And he found this guy, he's spiritually searching with his mind, and he found this guy. And the guy was chain smoking. And he looked at the guy and said, this guy needs to be cleaned up and he needs this work. And so he created the conditions for him to stop smoking and to come to India and be made a preceptor. And the guy was like, holy shit, right? And so, oftentimes, like, people look at things as like a chance or, a coincidence or some. But if there's a divine call and your soul is called to something, you heed it. And there's these things that are being done all the time by divine beings, whether it be wars that are created or any number of things. And, there's a consciousness to it. And so the problem with the truth community and people like Candace Owens and like many of you is you give way more power to the people that are depraved and thinking that they're calling the shots and they're making these choices. But oftentimes they're being used, and right now they're being used to destroy a demonic system. It's that fucking simple. And you could dive into it and go into the cesspit, or you could just accept that and realize the system's going to be destroyed, and everything that you think that all the purposes and reasons and goals that you have and everything's connected to the beastly system is going to go with it. And so you're going to have to repurpose yourself. You're going to have to find true purpose and true meaning. And that is only one way to do that, and that's connected to divinity within you. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing here. Okay, so I just did the voiceover introduction. I just didn't do it. I took a nap afterward. But, that's whatever that happened. And, Meghan Kelly said something horrific, which my wife told me about. And then it got recommended to me by YouTube. But before that, and it's during this same talk here, and it might be in the talk here, hopefully. I don't have to find it in a longer. This is a 17-minute clip. She minimized what Jeffrey Epstein did. But before that, I saw this 2 days ago, and I've been waiting to cover it. She basically excuses Trump. And, she tells the truth about some things. She's kind of a little bit, not as far as she needs to go on Israel. And, she's on the right side of some of these things. I don't even know right side or wrong side, but she's not, pushing out disinformation. At least she's, she's minimizing things a little bit, but not out and out just lying. But this thing's horrific. So let's start here, and then I'll get to the other piece, wherever that is, here. So I'm going to move this back here.
Abuser of women, and yes, at one point, we begin today with Jeffrey Epstein, convicted felon, pervert, abuser of women, and yes,
not women, girls.
At one point, a long time ago, friend of Donald Trump. Epstein also met with people like Katie Couric, George Stephanopoulos, the Dalai Lama, reportedly, many, many others who are not guilty of crimes just because they spent some time with the criminal Epstein.
Okay, so that is minimizing Trump's relationship with Epstein. Okay, and again, what a piece of shit she is. Like, just horrible. She's like, it might as well be just an out-and-out Zionist shill. Look at her fucking dude-ish fucking, it's like some dude dressed up like a woman and trying to do some kind of woman smirk with her deep voice. What a horrible piece of shit she is. Because she should know better, right? Well, let's go a little bit further here.
Epstein's back in the news this week, 6 years after he died in prison, awaiting trial on charges of sex trafficking minors. In the never-ending quest to finally know everything there is to know about Jeffrey Epstein and his dastardly deeds, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed Epstein's estate for his emails and related documents, and lo and behold, they got them. Okay, so that's let's go back to the beginning part, where she says that Trump was an acquaintance, a friend of his at some point, but so were all these other people. That doesn't make them sex offenders or complicit or guilty. Trump is clearly guilty. So, and I have a whole hour-long bit on Trump with inappropriate things he said to women and girls that he did with girls, bragging about going into the dressing room of some of them teenage girls in the Miss Teen USA contest pageant, and then
a young lady who was in the contest of Miss USA when she was 19, and he just walked in the dressing room when they were half naked or naked, and he said he got to do that because he was the owner of the pageant. I kind of get away with this, which is a total pedophile way of saying it, right? It's a creepy behavior. And then all the stuff, his ex-wife accusing him of rape in a divorce, his first wife, and all the other things, because he was mad at her, like some kind of thing that, he was getting back at her. I mean, so many things with him, right? This guy has said all kinds of creepy things and done all kinds of creepy things, banged a porn star. And then the things he said about Jeffrey Epstein, and then the people who were, one of them was his former business manager. He was Trump's business manager, and he said they were best friends, and things that Jeffrey Epstein's brother and other people said, and how much time they spent together. And Trump completely knew everything that Jeffrey Epstein was about and hung with him even after the conviction. I mean, he was, he just didn't disavow him really ever until he, had to. And so, Trump is a creep on his own, right? Said that Jeffrey Epstein likes young girls. I mean, he's guilty already. We already know that. You have enough information. And he's just a piece of shit on top of it, right? And she should know. Like, this dude should know. So first there was this.
One of the things people love about you is you speak your mind and you don't use a politician's filter. However, that is not without its downsides, in particular when it comes to women. You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, so Trump got pissed. We'll show you his reaction to this. But these fucking losers here, right? Even if it was just Rosie O'Donnell, this is a guy running for president, but it isn't that. And he, all the things that he was guilty of, they ignored. All the stuff, banging porn stars, divorced 3 times, cheating on all of his spouses, all the weird shit, friends with Jeffrey Epstein, all the things. Right? Like, fucking, it's just right there. And the grab him by the pussy comment.
Your Twitter account...
So there's that, right? And so this is how Trump responded.
This. You could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever. She was off base.
There's a weird thing to say, right? I mean, I think he was talking about her period here. Just, this whole thing. And she got into it. He had a thing about Meghan Kelly. And he was pissed at her. Now, Meghan Kelly left Fox saying that, that she was, and she wrote a book about it, became the movie Bombshell. And, these 3 women at Fox who were being sexually harassed and abused by Roger Ailes and these other people. The Fox News scandal. And she left Fox News and went to NBC News. She did a hit piece on Alex Jones. And she was trying to be somewhat liberal. She had her own kind of like Oprah-like show, some kind of shit there. And she didn't win an audience over there. And so then she came back and then became sort of a QB truther. And she healed this relationship with Donald Trump, and they became besties. And, she went back over to him, bowed down before him, right? Now, somebody who says she's been an abuse survivor and she was sexually harassed by men, and this guy's been a pig with women, a question that she asked, and he, became like a total bitch about it with this response. She knows, like she should know. Like she's selling out all women, or whatever it is, right? Not that, not like feminist women, but women in general. And Trump's been an absolute fucking disaster. And he has, as a president, especially the second term, and she's defending him on Epstein. Like she's just an absolute piece of shit, right?
Now, every media outlet known to man is reporting on every word Epstein penned related to Donald Trump in a mad search to tie the president to the disgraced financier's sexual crimes. So far, it hasn't worked. But this is
It's completely worked. It's worked for everyone but the dumbest of the dumb. Now, part of Trump, if you look back at those people cheering when Trump said Rosie O'Donnell, there are a lot of ravenous right-wing pieces of shit out there. Extremists, dumb fuck, QBs, Q-tards, fucking The QAnon people, right-wing fucking dopes, just binary fucks, inability for abstract thought, like inbred fucking, just the worst of the worst, right? Just like you have liberals like that. You have extremists who are radicalized, and they don't realize that both sides suck, both parties suck. I mean, all the things that are truthful. And it's just a distraction. You've been completely brainwashed, and they've given you two choices, like all the things that we know here. They don't get any of that shit. And they're ravenous, and they want somebody to go low. Like, Trump was willing to go low. And I really liked it because it was funny, and it was, like, truthful about what politics is all about. But these other politicians and their handlers, they know there's a line that you can't cross. Like, you can't appeal to the base level mentality, where it's just a complete extremism because it's fucking, it'll implode the country. Like, you can't win at that cost. You can't go so low that it becomes like a civil war. And Trump says, fuck it, I don't give a shit. All I care about is myself, because he doesn't agree with any of these people. What we all know, we should all know about Trump, and this thing with Jeffrey Epstein, is that he is an elitist. Trump has always been elitist. He isn't one of you. He's a guy who desperately wanted to be in the club. He wants to be in the highest level club. And the people that he associates with and looks up to are those people. He always has shit on the common man. He always abused his contractors, guys construction workers and, construction companies and all the rest of them, screwing them over, suing them, not paying them, stiffing them. He has a horrible history as a businessman and as a person with all of that kind of stuff. Screwing over the common people, having a better team of lawyers, bullying people. And he's just an elitist. He's always been an elitist. And he's been able to make it sound like he cares about you, and he doesn't even know what you're thinking. And he's always hobnobbed with these pieces of shit, including Jeffrey Epstein. This Illuminati, eyes wide shut level of people that are so depraved. And Trump is one of the most depraved. He's kind of the worst of all worlds. He's an ultra rich person, a kind of a guy who lied and faked about his wealth, a grifter, who ran his companies into the ground, mistreated his employees, especially the lower level ones, was always about himself screwing people over, an abuser of women, a womanizer, right? And then pretending to be this other guy when he's actually the person, people who have a problem with the elite and think Trump is going to battle the elite for them. Like, just how retarded is that? It's like the stupidest thing ever. And she knows this. They all know it, right? They know that Trump has crossed various lines here. And for whatever reason, to keep her audience or all these other things, plus he's the most shekels person. I mean, he's Donald half shekels Trump. They have a shekel, half shekel coin, right? Like he's the greatest friend Israel's ever had, a guy who's perpetrated this, this genocide, committed American resources, given Israel everything that they want to do this war crime, and then his fake assassination attempt and all his bullshit, his WWE lowbrow fucking rhetoric and politics. And at the end of the day, he's an elitist. He's the worst kind of elitist. And his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, his daughter, and all his piece of shit kids, they're an elitist, fucking ultra-wealthy family that are, the opposite of what America's supposed to be about. Bringing in martial law, all the shit he's doing, the tariffs, and just a fucking bonehead and a bozo on top of it. And she knows all this. They all do. And yet she's still pandering to the fucking guy here.
Pathetic and blatant piece of proof that these people don't care at all about sex trafficking victims. The media cares about one thing and one thing only: getting Donald Trump.
And you should care about that too. Because she doesn't care about them either, because she knows Donald Trump's blocking it and Kash Patel and all these people. She's just on the wrong side of this thing. But then she said something. Let me see if I can find that. I mean, just like an absolute piece of shit, right? But let me find that that thing that she said, minimizing Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. So here it is here.
From the start, years and years ago, that Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. This is this person's view, who was there for a lot of this.
She's got some Hebrew writing here.
But that he was into the barely legal type. Like, he liked 15-year-old girls.
Okay, so Jesus fucking Christ. That's not a pedophile, right? And so, first of all, let's say you're in California and the age of consent is 16 in some of these southern states, right? State by state. So it's not whether it's legal or not. It's whether it's fucking abusive or not, right? And this person, whoever's commenting on this, I worked in the field of abuse for years. And there's all these different, things that qualify as abuse. So if you give children pornography, expose them to sexual content, that's sexual abuse. So that's happening on the internet and TV shows and, parents or whatever it is. Kids have access to stuff that they're not ready to handle. So like almost every kid now gets sexually abused because they're watching porn when they're 7, 8, 9, 10 years, 11 years old. So that's one form of sexual abuse, right? It's, a matter of power, who has more power in the relationship and all the things that he did. He human trafficked young teenage girls and maybe worse. We don't know what else he did or was into. We don't know all the depravity, but that's more than enough. Plus he was in his 50s and 60s. It isn't like he was 18 and the girl was 15, which is still abuse and illegal in some places, especially how much coercion was involved, whether it was consensual or not. There's these different factors. And so, I had kids in treatment center who were 16 and the girl was 15. But they pressured the girl. And the girl, things like that, right? And so to compare something like that, which these kids had to give up a couple of years of their lives and go through treatment, when the age wasn't that much different. But that was a legal issue, but also a moral issue. And Jeffrey Epstein's an out-and-out fucking creep. Now, she's saying all these things now because all these people are defending Donald Trump like it's okay for him to be what he was, and Jeffrey wasn't that bad anyway. Like, she's just a total piece of shit, right?
And I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for this. I'm just giving you facts.
That's not a fact. That's somebody's opinion.
That he wasn't into like 8-year-olds, but he liked the very young teen types that could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby. And that is what
again, just you don't, if you go through life basically trying to figure out what's legal and what you can get away with, right? No matter what it is, you're an absolute piece of shit. Like, the laws shouldn't apply to you because you don't need the laws. You're not going to murder someone. I talked about how I had this sociopath. One of my clients, when I worked in 2 different treatment centers, and then the second one, I had my master's in counseling, and I had, 15 clients, whatever it was, 15 or 16, whatever the unit, there was a unit there. I think it was 16 maybe. So I had these 16 kids on my, maybe it was 12. I think it was 12. And that was more than enough. So there was these various units of group therapy. There was 5 different units that, like semesters, right? And the first was the assault cycle where they had to take responsibility and name all the things they did, confess everything they've ever done, regardless of whether people knew about it or not. Like all the offenses, they're supposed to come clean. Because if you found out they didn't, they had to go back at the beginning and start over. So it was like, there's some, if new evidence came in, right? And then they had to do victim empathy, learn how to be empathetic to their victims. And if there was an apology letter, if it was a member of the family, like a younger sister, there might be a therapy session where the abuser would take full responsibility for what happened and apologize. They would write these letters to their victims, where the victim may or may not get these letters, but they had to take responsibility for everything they did. There's assault cycle 2, which was further along the assault cycle. That actually was the second. There's assault cycle 1, assault cycle 2, where they learned about their assault cycle and their behaviors and their triggers and things, their victim consciousness that would trigger these behaviors and things. And then there was relapse prevention 1 and 2, where they learned how to prevent themselves from doing this stuff again. And it was pretty intensive, and these kids had to go through these highly structured therapy programs. And I had this one kid who was idolizing Eminem. This is back in the 2000s, right? So this is probably 2002, 2003. And he was idolizing Eminem. He was he was a total sociopath, and he abused his stepsister. Like he didn't want his father marrying this woman, and she had a daughter. So he thought a way to break them up was to sexually abuse the girl, which got him thrown into treatment center for a couple of years. I mean, he was a total asshole, piece of shit, scumbag. Like just a sociopath, right? And I got a story about this when I'm done with this one story. And so we were talking about something. He said, the only reason that people don't murder is because they're scared of going to jail. And I'm like, well, lots of people don't murder because they have fucking compassion and, they have some, inner morality. And he was like, no, that doesn't exist. He was like completely thinking I was just making shit up because he was a sociopath. Like he didn't understand. Like scary conversation. Like I'm like, this is who this person is. And so there's some point that my boss decided that there was this program we were supposed to bring these kids through, and that was we were bringing them out to the woods, and we were going to go rock climbing, and we were going to rappel down the mountain. And I fucking didn't trust the guy who was running the program, and I was like, these kids are fucking crazy. You can't fucking, he wanted the kids to hold the ropes. And this kid was mad at me because, I was making him do his work. There was always going to be some anger from the clients towards the people. And I was rappelling down the mountain, and this kid ended up being the person holding my rope, right? So I couldn't, he kept on grabbing the rope so I couldn't freely go down the mountain. And I turned around, I saw who it was, and I said, somebody else grab the fucking rope. And I was like, I don't want that kid holding my fucking rope, right? I mean, he could have dropped me, all this shit. And he was preventing me from doing it, like, smoothly. So I was banging into the cliff, right? When you're rappelling, you have control over your rope, and then they're there to stop it if there's an emergency. But he kept on stopping it and making me, I was trying to jump down the rocks, right? And the guy was there, and like everyone paid attention because I fucking yelled it loud. And I got down, and I lit into the fucking guy. I'm like, these are fucking sociopaths. I'm like saying, you cannot allow this to fucking happen. Like there'll be a fucking murder out here, right? Like there's something like this is they can't fucking these aren't these kids you can expect them to have some kind of a moral code. Plus, I already knew what this kid was, and so you have these type of people that they don't have anything internally to stop them from doing wrong, and everybody has, certain areas where they're a little bit flexible in their morals, but someone like Jeffrey Epstein and these people, because she's part of this club, she knows all these fucking people are into 15-year-old girls and boys and other shit, this depraved fucking people. But trying to make a case to that to your fucking Christian dumb fuck viewers and all these people. So, she's an absolute piece of shit. Let's just move on. But again, what's with the fucking here and this here, right? So I mean, she's trying to get back in the good graces there, right? She's trying to, and she brought on Ben Shapiro and all this other bullshit. She's obviously had a talking to, She's excusing Epstein, she's excusing Trump, and she's bringing out fucking this, this Shekel, and she's Meghan Shekels. Okay, so I want to just add something to this Megyn Kelly thing. I was going to cover Donald Trump slamming Marjorie Taylor Greene and going after her. I'll cover that in my next video. Hopefully, I got to pull that tab up. Let me do that right now. But I just wanted to end the comment here. I have one more little Erika Franze thing, and I just want to say more about the Megyn Kelly thing. So it's obvious that there's a lot of these people who are, trying to do a balancing act, and it was a balancing act that Charlie Kirk had to do. That America and Americans, and it might be purposeful, I mean, it always have to suspect that it's purposeful, are moving away from Israel. The support of Israel, the positive attitude towards Israel, the shekel taking, the shill stuff, and then the wars and all the other stuff. Like young Americans on both the left and the right and other people are not wanting this bullshit anymore. And there's a narrative that's been around for a long time that no one was able to talk about in the truth community, but a lot of people knew about. And so, people knew about this and weren't able to say anything because of the restrictions on social media and other places and the, whatever was going on, the censorship that was afoot, right? And so you have these Republican people who are risking alienating their audience, but they're also shekel taking, and they don't want to give up their shekels. And they are, when you take shekels, that's like you're joining a club you can't get out of. Like, that's like joining the mafia, even worse. Like that kind of shit. There's no, hey, guess what? I want to leave now. Thanks for the money. Like they own you. And so Megyn Kelly and these people are all exhibiting this issue. When I was looking for that clip of Megyn Kelly saying, it's not so bad, he's just like some barely legal, that stuff. There was a Daily Show clip and it showed all these Republicans. I would show you it, but the Daily Show is bad at copywriting, but they had all these Republicans, right-leaning pundits and media people defending Donald Trump and minimizing the whole thing and that stuff. And Megyn Kelly is defending Trump here, but also defending Israel, which is the same thing, because Donald Trump's Israel's best shill, the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. And she's having to defend Epstein as well and minimize it because Israel is connected, as is Donald Trump, to Epstein. And so she had to say things that she knows aren't going to go over well with her fans and everybody else. And, she's going to be targeted, which she is, and all this shit. She knew she's fucked. But she just has to go through with it because, she's a servant to these, whatever the power brokers that she serves, and this is what she has to do. But her point that, that even if it was just barely legal girls, girls who are 16, 17, depending on what state you live in and the laws and all that shit, he groomed these girls, he recruited them, not only him, but he had people doing it, including Ghislaine Maxwell. And these are ultra wealthy people with lots of power and influence. It's not like just some pimp on the street who's a scumbag pimp, but this is somebody who has connections. He recruited these girls to give him massages and pleasure him sexually. And then he pimped these girls out to other people. And whilst pimping these girls out to other people, he was working for intelligence agencies that got him a cushy deal where he didn't even serve any real prison time. And, he was given a deal that was that everybody that was involved with him and himself could never be investigated again for these crimes, right? It's obviously he's working for the CIA and Mossad and all the rest of those things, right? And so in all that, it's completely fucked. Like, it's just really bad. It's horrible, the level of what he did. He's a pimp. He's a human trafficker. He's a recruiter. He has people working for him, people who have high-level ties to the government. And he's working for a foreign government that's using this information to extract more wealth and weapons from America so they can commit genocides around the world. So it's as bad as it could get. I mean, she's trying to minimize this thing, but it couldn't be any fucking worse than it is, right? Only if it was like, younger kids? What, if it was infants or something? Yeah, okay. But all the rest of it is as bad as it could get. And Jeffrey Epstein's tied to Israel and tied to Trump, and there's no debating this, and it's just, people know. Like, most people kind of have a sense of this. I mean, you're getting to plus 50%, 60% of the people knowing this or more, that Trump is complicit and Israel is tied to this and Mossad and all these things. Charlie Kirk was even saying it. So if Charlie Kirk and she was saying that Epstein had ties to Mossad, and now she's saying, well, he just was into barely legal stuff, that means that they got her, right? She got gotten. And whatever way she got gotten, it's as embarrassing for her, but, she's at least alive, and maybe she's still getting shekels, who knows. Anyways, let's get to this Erika Franze thing. Okay, so this is Erika Franze. She's got a rather large face. But this is before she was married to Charlie Kirk. Now, this is Calvary Christian, which she was going after Candace Owens. And I covered it in my not my last video, but the video before that, I think. Maybe the last video, I don't know which. And one of my viewers left a comment saying, oh, you got to check out these interviews, but didn't leave me any guidance. So if that person's listening, like, I'm not going to listen to this whole fucking video. I'm not going to comb through it. You know, I mean, it's so hard for me to listen to her. She's so fake. At least she's not grieving. She's probably better in this thing. But she's really pimping out this church here. And so I'm going to leave this up for a day or two. And I'm not going to go through it unless there's some bombshell thing that somebody tells me about and gives me like a timestamp or something. Other than that, you know, I mean, you guys can watch it. It's a 2-parter. This is part 2.
So we've kind of, you know, tenants, people are starting to come back, but it's just been hard. And it seems like the majority of the churches in this area have really compromised. Like I said, the don't ask, don't tell. We don't talk about that. We don't,
Right.
I wouldn't call them prosperity doctor, not Joel Osteen, but they're kind of let's just
Right.
not talk about the tough issues. Let's not get Charlie Kirk because
Right.
he's going to be too divisive. We can't do that. It's just going to, you know,
Right.
and I'm like, well,
Exactly.
you know, if you,
So this is before she was dating Charlie Kirk. I believe this is before that.
know anything about, and I'm sure Charlie knows this, and you probably knows, but it was the Black Robe Regiment. It was the pastors
Yep,
who
there
talked
it was.
about rebelling against England. It was
Amen.
the pastors that were preaching. That's why you see Patriot. It was the pastor. I mean, I don't know if you know George Muhlenberg. He used to be right at the entrance of the Capitol Dome, and he was the
Okay,
pastor.
so let's move forward to where she talks here.
Your truth is just as important. You know, it's equal to mine. But we say, okay,
Exactly.
we hear your truth, we respect your opinion, but here's what God says. And so anyway.
You mean the Bible, not what God says. Your interpretation of the Bible.
I'm preaching the choir, sorry.
Exactly.
I just want to say, it's just good to hear
No,
someone
no,
say
and-
that
and I think-
that who's not a pastor. So.
Yeah, no, and I think I'm actually in some weird way, and I'm gonna try and explain this as I'm thinking of it, is that I'm actually grateful that you guys are kind of on an island on your own, because it shows how truthful and real and how straight to scripture and how straight to Jesus you guys are.
They're just straight to Jesus. No middleman. They go straight to Jesus.
Because God knew that he just needed one. He just needed one church, and that's you guys. He didn't need 4. He needed just one strong church. And I feel like people will start coming back, leaving those other churches and coming to you guys, because they're going to realize very soon, once churches and everything does, you know, fully open back up, they're going to start hearing some things in the pulpit that they did not originally agree with going into the whole lockdowns and shutdowns.
Okay, so this must have been, she was dating Charlie Kirk around the COVID time, because this is 2021, and so they had been together around 4 years, 5 years, something. So maybe she was just dating him. But she's totally endorsing this church. I just can't deal with it. This is a long video already. But you know, to say those other churches suck and we only need one good one, and you guys are the right one, Jesus, right to Jesus, right to frickin' Jesus, right? All right, so I'll leave this open. I don't know, like, you know, there'll be more shit from her that I have to cover, and TPUS gay and all that stuff. This video won't be out till Monday, so then I'll see whatever I do tomorrow. But anyways, I'm going to go do some work outside, and, you know, I got the majority of this video done. This video is going to be about 3 hours long already. Anyway, so let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.